and a Juris Doctor from the New York University School of Law. Welcome to the committee, Mr. Sykes.
And our final witness is Miss Anikia Ford Morthel. Absolutely. She's the superintendent of the Berkeley Unified School District in Berkeley, California. Miss Morthel is an urban educator and community activist with over 21 years of experience. Aside from serving as superintendent of Berkeley Unified School District, she is a professor, senior lecturer at the urban education at Loyola Marymount University. She is active in the community, serving as a board member for organizations such as 826 Valencia, West Ed, and other nonprofit organizations with missions aligned to hers. She is a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Ms. Ford Morthel holds a BA and master's degrees in education from the University of California at Berkeley. Welcome to all our witnesses. We thank you for being here and look forward to your testimony. Pursuant to committee rules, I would ask that you limit each of your oral presentations to 5 minutes with summary of your written statements. Your full written statement is in the record, but just like us up here, you get 5 minutes. That's what our little timer system will do it. If by chance you go past, I'll give you a little type, and that's the great way to say wrap it up. I want to recognize of your responsibility to provide accurate information to the subcommittee. With that, let's get started. It's now a pleasure to recognize Mr. Banks for his 5-minute testimony. Welcome, you're recognized.
Okay, hope I didn't lose my time. Thank you so much again. Good morning, Chairwoman Fox, Chairman Bean, Ranking Member Scott, Ranking Member Bonamici, and distinguished members of the committee and subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to address the horrific rise in anti-Semitism, the #1 religious-based hate crime in America. I also want to thank Devorah Halberstam, Rabbi Joseph Potasnik, Michael Cohen, and Reverend Jacques DeGraff for joining me here today. Today, I will share how we are confronting this scourge of anti-Semitism in our New York City public schools. The New York City school system, which is our nation's largest, is a community of over 1 million students and staff. We speak over 180 different languages in our schools. Our diversity, however, means that our classrooms are not insulated from the global stage. Since October 7th, our students and staff, Jewish and Muslim, Israeli and Palestinian, have suffered immensely. I, too, have felt deep pain, reflecting on my own 2 trips to Israel with the Jewish Community Relations Council. Again and again, my mind has returned to my visit to Yad Vashem, a profoundly moving experience for me. In the immediate aftermath of October 7th, New York City Mayor Eric Adams made very powerful remarks condemning the terror attacks. I, too, sent messages to our school community strongly condemning the heinous acts of Hamas. But words are not enough. There have been unacceptable incidents of anti-Semitism in our schools. When Jewish students or teachers feel unwelcome or unsafe, that should sound the alarm for us all. So I recognize the urgency of addressing this crisis from my seat. As an educator of 30+ years, as the leader of the system nurturing the next generation of New Yorkers. It is not only my job to produce good readers and writers. Our schools must also build good people, people who demonstrate respect and appreciation for our shared humanity. When it comes to rooting out anti-Semitism, our public schools must be part of the answer. So let me tell you about our work to meet this moment, which are focused on safety, engagement, and education. #1, safety is a precondition for learning. I started my career as a school safety officer, and my father was a proud, decades-long officer of the New York City Police Department. Keeping schools safe is in my DNA. When anti-Semitism rears its head, I believe we must respond, and we have. We have removed, disciplined, or are including removing a principal in the middle of a school. We have suspended at least 30 students. We've involved the NYPD when hate crimes are committed. And we've retrained all 1,600 principals on our discipline code to ensure that it is enforced properly. Secondly, we've engaged dozens of partners to help us design longer-term solutions. My instinct as a leader in moments of crisis is never to shy away from an issue, but rather to lean into it to understand it better. New York City is home to the largest Jewish community outside of Israel and many of the nation's foremost Jewish institutions. So we have strengthened our relationships with these partners, which include the UJA Federation, the JCRC, the Anti-Defamation League, the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Museum of Tolerance, the Jewish Children's Museum, Project Witness, and many more. I also launched for the first time in our history an Interfaith Advisory Council because we must model for our students how to build bridges, engage in genuine dialogue, and share each other's pain in challenging times. And finally, education. We cannot simply discipline our way out of this problem. The true antidote to ignorance and bias is to teach. My own children learned about anti-Semitism firsthand from our next-door neighbors who were Holocaust survivors in Teaneck, New Jersey. But as survivors pass on, and in light of current events, the need for education becomes even more pressing. Our students cannot grow up to view anyone as the other. So in addition to covering the Holocaust in the 8th, 10th, and 11th grades, we're creating a robust Holocaust educator guide with the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and we're building a brand new curriculum highlighting the culture and contributions of the Jewish community, because the history of the Jewish people extends far beyond the Holocaust. We've also partnered with the Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes and a new hate crimes curriculum. We've expanded our anti-Semitism resources and workshops. Finally, let me just say this. At New York City Public Schools, we are focused on our charge to fight hate and foster inclusion through safety, engagement, and education. We're working hard, and we have a long way to go. There's always more to do. I hope in New York we can be a candle in the darkness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bank. Ms. Silvestri, you are recognized for 5 minutes. Welcome.
Chairman Bean, Ranking Member Bonamici, and members of the subcommittee, good morning. My name is Carla Silvestri, and I'm the president of the Board of Education for Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today about our efforts to address anti-Semitism in our school system. Let me begin by assuring the committee the Board of Education I lead is committed to combating anti-Semitism, hate speech, and racism wherever and whenever we see it. I can't tell you we've gotten it right every time, but as a board, we are committed to working with our administrators and our community to constantly improve our processes and our outcomes. Montgomery County Public Schools is the 15th largest school district in the country with 160,000 students and nearly 25,000 employees. We are one of the most diverse districts in the nation, and our families and students come from every major religion and ethnicity and speak over 162 languages at home. More than a third of our county residents are foreign-born. In Montgomery County, we have an elected part-time Board of Education with a governance and oversight role. The board sets the standard for achievement and accountability. Our core mission is education. This is the lens through which we approach our relationships with students, employees, and the community. This is the perspective I bring to today's hearing. I also bring the perspective of my history. When I was just 8, I came to this country to escape the violence stemming from Guatemala's civil war. I became a proud U.S. citizen in 2007 and went on to be elected to serve on the Board of Education by the citizens of Montgomery County. I'm also the parent of a student in our school system, and incidents of anti-Semitism and hate-based language are extremely important to me. With that in mind, I know the committee is aware of recent press reports and public complaints around anti-Semitic imagery, language, and vandalism in our district. Let me be clear. We do not shy away from imposing consequences for hate-based behavior, including anti-Semitism. Our policy is to initiate an investigation each time the school system receives a complaint or we witness particular anti-Semitic, hate-filled, or racist language or actions. There are a range of consequences for teachers and staff, and if our investigation finds a staff member cannot uphold the employee code of conduct and support a safe learning environment for all students, they will not remain in Montgomery County Public Schools. Student discipline follows the Student Code of Conduct and students' rights and responsibilities. We are taking affirmative steps to address anti-Semitism and other forms of hate. First, in the past year, we revised policies and procedures to strengthen our response to anti-Semitism, hate, and racist behavior. Second, we have put in place a clear reporting process and training for school leaders and staff. We are empowering students and families to report incidents of harassment so that we can take action. Third, we're working to prevent anti-Semitic incidents from happening in the first place through education. We enhanced the curriculum throughout K-12 to expand on topics related to the Jewish experience. Fourth, we are strengthening our relationships and partnerships with our community. We participated in listening sessions in synagogues, and this year, 12 community organizations joined us to form a hate bias advisory group to support our collective effort to address hate-based speech and incidents, including anti-Semitism. Fifth, starting this summer, we will have mandatory hate-based training for all staff. In closing, anti-Semitism has no place in Montgomery County Public Schools. The suffering caused by anti-Semitism, hate, and racism interferes with students' learning and well-being. I want to do everything in my power to make sure all students can pursue their education without worrying about anti-Semitic, racist, or hate-filled threats. We will continue to evaluate our policies and our actions to ensure all students and families, every single one of them, feel safe, valued, and welcome in our school system. I welcome the opportunity to continue this important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Silvestri. Well done. Mr. Sykes, welcome to the committee. You are recognized.
Thank you. Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member Scott, Subcommittee Chair Bean, Subcommittee Ranking Member Bonamici, and members of the subcommittee. On behalf of the ACLU, thank you for the privilege of testifying today. I want to start by acknowledging that today's topic, confronting anti-Semitism, is a gravely important one. By many accounts, anti-Semitic incidents have been more common in recent years, and Jewish colleagues and friends have been struggling. I'm close with a law school dean and a New York City public high school principal, both Jewish, who understand full well the impact of anti-Semitism. But these Jewish school leaders are themselves being accused of anti-Semitism, or at least failing to do enough to stop anti-Semitism in their school communities. They are truly in unenviable positions. These are deeply complicated and confusing times. But I've been invited here not to opine on anti-Semitism, nor to condemn or defend my fellow witnesses. Rather, I'd like to use my time to make three key points. First, I'll briefly describe the First Amendment and its key principles. Second, I'll describe how the First Amendment applies in schools. Third, I'll suggest more productive ways to deal with controversial speech. The text of the First Amendment is short, so I'll just read it. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. As you no doubt noticed, the very first word of the First Amendment is Congress. You all are the stars of the show. The First Amendment is primarily about restricting the government's authority related to 5 related freedoms: religion, speech, the press, assembly, and the right to petition. Without government action, the First Amendment does not apply. This is why the First Amendment applies in public schools, but generally not in private ones. Bert Newborn, a legendary figure at the ACLU, has described the poetry behind the ordering of the 5 freedoms protected by the First Amendment. First, the government cannot regulate your religion. That is, what you believe, your thoughts, your ideas, and your faith. Second, the government cannot abridge the freedom of speech. Now you've gone from having an idea to communicating that idea to others around you. Third, the government cannot abridge the freedom of the press. Now you've gone from an idea to speaking that idea to those who are within earshot, to using the press, which really means publishing or otherwise disseminating ideas to a wider audience. Fourth is the right of the people peaceably to assemble. Now you're not just thinking something or saying something or writing and publishing something. Now you're gathering and mobilizing people around this idea because people like to feel solidarity and share physical and digital space. Fifth is the right to petition the government. This means that you have the right not only to have an idea, not only to speak that idea or to publish the idea, and not only to galvanize people around this idea, but you have the right to bring that idea to the seat of power, to redress grievances. The First Amendment, looking closely at the text, can be read as facilitating the journey from an idea to a movement. But notwithstanding the strong protections of the First Amendment, not all speech is protected. True threats, fighting words, incitement, and obscenity are categories of unprotected speech that we allow the government more leeway in regulating. So what does all this mean in the K-12 context? The Supreme Court has famously said that students and teachers do not lose their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate. But the court has also recognized that public schools necessarily have more authority to regulate speech at school than the government would normally have in other contexts. The government can regulate official school content like curriculum as long as its decisions are reasonably related to a legitimate educational purpose. But authorities may punish student speech only if it will lead to substantial disruption within the school environment. Outside school, student speech is fully protected by the First Amendment. The First Amendment also protects the right to access information, including students' right to access information through school library shelves. Despite this, school board officials, lawmakers, and others across the country have recently stepped up efforts to ban books from circulation in libraries. Government employees at work are generally not protected by the First Amendment, but teachers do maintain their First Amendment rights when they are outside of school, just like students. Parents also have an important role to play in K-12 schools. Families may have the right to opt their child out of select teachings, but no family has the right to control what all children are allowed to learn, including content about racism, sexuality, and gender expression. Finally, I hope we can remember that when exposed to more speech and more information, we can and do change our minds. I submit that between throwing up our hands and saying there's nothing we can do to address controversial speech, and excommunicating people because of what they have said or thought, are all the good ideas for how schools and communities can heal and grow together. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sykes. And Ms. Ford Morthell, you are recognized. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Chairman Bean, Ranking Member Bonamici, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for asking me to participate in this critical conversation about anti-Semitism in K-12 schools. I hope to share the ongoing work we are doing in Berkeley Unified to oppose anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all forms of hate, and to provide every student safe, welcoming, and humanizing classrooms during these challenging times. My name is Enikia Ford Morthell, and I'm the superintendent of Berkeley Unified School District. I am honored to be the steward of the district's powerful mission to enable and inspire our diverse student body to achieve academic excellence and make positive contributions to the world. I grew up in Inglewood, California, and witnessed how naturally brilliant and curious Black and brown children, thirsty for engagement, were trapped by narratives that left them misunderstood and often ignored. These experiences formed the roots of my belief that schools must nurture the heart, soul, purpose, and intellect of each child. In Berkeley Unified, we work to ensure that each and every child is seen, valued, and educated. We embrace this work every day, and it's what called me to do this work in this district. Berkeley is a small, diverse urban school district serving around 9,100 students in our 11 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 2 high schools. Many know that I often describe our students as our babies. As young as 4, they are all someone's baby, their most prized creation. It is a privilege and an awesome responsibility to serve them. Public schools reflect the values and aspirations of their local communities. Berkeley is no different. Our history of activism, social justice, diversity, and inclusion is alive and well today. And we recognize the need to teach students to express themselves with respect and compassion. This is why we passed a policy against hate speech last year. True equity and inclusion requires deep listening, ongoing reflection, engagement, and continuous learning. As I've engaged members of our Jewish community, some have shared painful experiences of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitic incidents in our schools are never acceptable, and they are not who we are. The conflict in the Middle East has directly impacted our schools. Students and staff have family and friends who died or were kidnapped during the October 7th Hamas attack, and many have deep concern for what is happening in Israel. Berkeley-born Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Poland was kidnapped on October 7th. Today is day 214. Other Berkeley students and staff have family and friends who have died, been injured, are missing, or are living under horrific conditions in Gaza. Most heartbreakingly, in both Israel and Gaza, the death and suffering includes children. As educators, too often we are called upon to address heart-wrenching events that occur far beyond the walls of our classrooms. Our young students with ties to either Israel or Gaza, some deeply traumatized by the horror they see and hear, sit side by side in our Berkeley classrooms. They are friends. We work hard to make sure they are all seen and all safe. Our babies sometimes say hurtful things. We are mindful that all kids make mistakes. We know that our staff are not immune to missteps either, and we don't ignore them when they occur. When the days of October 7th, we began providing resources to our families and our educators about how to support our children and each other. Since October 7th, the district has had formal complaints alleging anti-Semitism arising from 9 incidents within our jurisdiction. However, anti-Semitism is not pervasive in Berkeley Unified School District. When investigations show that an anti-Semitic event has occurred, we take action to teach, correct, and redirect our students. We do not publicly share our actions because student information is private and legally protected under federal and state law. As a result, some believe we do nothing. This is not true. Likewise, when an investigation shows that one of our educators has crossed the line, we take appropriate action. In California, personnel actions are also private and legally protected, so non-disclosure can again be confused with an action. We work proactively to cultivate respect, understanding, and love in our diverse district, modeling how to uplift and honor each individual that makes up the beautiful fabrics of our schools. This month, for the 3rd year, we're celebrating Jewish American Heritage Month. We are a community with differing, deeply held beliefs in this challenging moment, and it is and can be uncomfortable. As I speak to you right now, our families are packing school lunches, students are heading to bus stops, and educators are turning on classroom lights. Soon, the bells will ring, and our students will begin learning side by side. I look forward to this conversation this morning, but I also look forward to getting back to them, our babies, to do and continue to do the work that needs to be done in Berkeley. Thank you.
Ms. Ford-Morthel, thank you very much. Under Committee Rule 9, we will now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. Put the clock on, Bean, because I'm going to begin right now with some. Does Israel have the right to exist as a Jewish state?
Absolutely.
Ms. Silvestri?
Yes, absolutely.
Ms. Ford-Morthel?
Yes.
Is the phrase "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," is that anti-Semitic?
I think most Jewish people experience that as anti-Semitic, and as such, it is not allowed in our schools.
You would say it is.
I would say it's
Ms.
anti-Semitic.
Silvestri?
It is if the intent is the destruction of the Jewish people, yes.
And it is, and it is. So I would say I'd put you down as a yes. You're okay with that? A yes?
Yes.
Ms. Ford-Morthel? It's a yes or you can just go yes or no.
It is if it is calling for the elimination of the Jewish people in Israel. And I will also say that I recognize that it does have different meaning to different members of
I'm
our
going to go
community.
yes. I'll put you down yes. I got a boogie because 5 minutes goes by so fast. Were Hamas actions on October 7th, was that a terrorist attack, Mr. Banks?
Absolutely.
Ms. Silvestri?
Yes.
Ms. Ford-Morthel?
Yes.
Is terrorism ever justified? Mr. Banks?
I don't think so. Not terrorism, no.
Ms. Silvestri? Ms. Ford-Morthel?
I would agree, no.
Congratulations. Y'all all have, y'all from Florida, y'all have all done a remarkable job testifying, but just like some college presidents before you that sat in the very same seats, they also, in many instances, said the right thing, but then we watched the TV monitors, and America watched the monitors of their campuses on fire with hatred, really reversing everything they said that they're protecting students, and when they were really not. This morning, I attended a gathering, a press conference, just a chance for students and teachers and parents in your school districts that have said nothing is being done, some really horrible things. We've gotten reports in your school districts across America, over 246 very vile anti-Semitic acts that have happened. So, Mr. Banks,
Sure.
what are you doing with teachers that are are teaching hate. Have you fired any? Have you gotten that has its basis in safety? And you've said that earlier. You fired teachers that are teaching this?
Anyone that would suggest, I can't speak for my colleagues, but anyone who would suggest that we haven't done anything, that is certainly not correct. We have done quite a bit. Again, you have to remember, this is a very large system. And when incidents arise, we investigate every single one of them. We take them very, very seriously. We have taken a wide range of disciplinary actions on all of these issues. And so,
have students been fired, expelled?
Well, we don't fire students.
Yeah, I stand corrected.
But we have given appropriate discipline. I said in my opening testimony, wide range of students who have been suspended from school. We have taken action against employees. We have terminated people as well.
You have terminated people.
Oh, absolutely.
Mr. Banks, thank you so much. Ms. Silvestri, I met with one of your students this morning who, it's one thing, bullies exist, but this student has said, but for being Jewish, why I was suffered physical harm. Have you expelled students and teachers?
In terms of speaking first about teachers, we have taken action in some cases. We put them.
You've gotten rid of teachers. You said, they don't belong in Montgomery County schools. You're teaching hatred, and we're going to get rid of you. Has that happened?
We have taken disciplinary action, yes.
Have you fired anybody?
No.
So you allow them to continue to teach hate. One of the people in this at this meeting I gathered was one of your teachers who is Jewish, who is scared for her life and has suffered greatly because she is reporting anti-Semitism on your campus in one of your schools, yet she's the one that's suffering. Are you aware of this?
I don't have all the details of that case, but retaliation against teachers is not acceptable in our school district.
So you haven't fired anybody. Do you think people need to be fired if they're teaching hatred and letting people?
Absolutely. As ever, again, there will be deeper consequences up to and including termination.
Have to face these people, and I'm telling you, they're fired up, and they have stories that are heartbreaking. It's hard enough to go to school as a kid without suffering. It's just a shame, and I think we're better than this as a nation. It's time to all stand together. I've got so many questions, and I will now yield to Ranking Member Bonamici for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses. As I stated in my opening statement, there's a need to balance the civil rights of students to be free from discrimination under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act with the First Amendment right to free speech and expression. I want to reiterate that we must stand together against anti-Semitism and do more to combat the harassment of Jewish students. And first and foremost, we must support the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. OCR is the primary office for investigating and intervening in Title VI violations, and that's true both in K-12 schools and on college campuses. But OCR continues to investigate a record number of incidences of discrimination and hate, receiving more than 19,000 complaints in 2023. 2024, the office has already seen about a 26% increase in complaints. Now, despite those challenges in increasing cases, OCR has only half the staff that it had when it was established 45 years ago. So half the staff, but an increase in the significant increase in the number of cases. So there's no question that more resources are needed to hire additional staff and increase the capacity of the office to fulfill its mission. Unfortunately, the Appropriations Committee majority has proposed a 25% cut to the program fiscal year 2024. We can't cut a program when there's increased need and there's already only half the staff it had 45 years ago. Well, thankfully, this cut was not enacted, but as other members of this committee would agree, maintaining funding at the current level is still not enough, given the volume of discriminatory instances in our nation's schools. So I'm going to start with a question for Chancellor Banks.
Yes.
What steps has your school system taken to address anti-Semitism proactively before it becomes a problem? For example, can you tell us more about your Meeting the Moment plan and the ways it addresses safety, education, and engagement?
Yeah, so first of all, as we talk about safety, because we really start with that, and that is reinforced by the fact that we take action in every single one of these cases. Whenever an issue is brought to our attention, I can't state that I can prevent every incident from ever happening. But our role as leaders are to make sure that once it is brought to our attention, that we respond in an appropriate fashion. And that is what we have been doing. Since this time, we've had 281 incidents since October 7th. Approximately 42% were anti-Semitic and 30% were Islamophobic. And so this is an issue that ranges on both sides. We take every single one of those very, very seriously. We investigate, and then we initiate the appropriate level of conduct. I've got this is our student code of conduct. It's a more than 40-plus page document that's been developed over many, many years. We certainly would seek to enter this into evidence or put this on the record for this committee. But
I ask that be admitted into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. And so there are a wide range of disciplinary processes that we take place. But we also have to follow a process of due process. Our teachers are represented by unions. They have rights, and we engage them in that process.
Thank you. And I do want to get to the other witnesses,
Sure.
but thank you so much. And I know you've all expressed a desire to work with outside groups to address anti-Semitism in your school district. So both Ms. Silvestre and Ms. Ford-Morthel, what is your approach? How do you anticipate that it will help prevent issues and instances of anti-Semitism? If we start with Ms. Silvestre and then Ms. Ford-Morthel.
Our partnerships with our community organizations bring expertise, cultural expertise that maybe some of our school leaders do not have. And so they help enhance the work that we do with, in this case, a hate bias action plan. We have 12 different community groups from various perspectives to help us get it right. We want to get it right, and these community groups will help us do that.
Thank you. And Ms. Ford-Morthel.
Thank you. I would agree with Ms. Silvestri that it is both bringing expertise, but it's also bringing what I think is really important, the opportunity to really listen and learn and understand different perspectives and experiences. That's something that we do in Berkeley that we really value, and we do believe in the value of collective coming in and sharing different ideas, perspectives, and different ways to address issues. And so we truly believe that not just the expertise and sharing experiences, but the collaboration and bringing together of different minds and hearts will lead us to the best ways to address it.
I'm almost out of time, but in my remaining 35 seconds, Mr. Sykes, if you could just summarize what is the interplay between Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the First Amendment in schools?
Sure, thank you. The schools must act when there is a hostile educational environment under Title VI. And that means there's unwelcome conduct based on a protected characteristic that's subjectively or objectively offensive and so severe or pervasive that it limits or denies a person's ability to participate in or benefit from an educational program. So the law is clear that the schools must act in those situations, notwithstanding the Tinker test that we described before.
And do you agree that we need funding to do that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member. We now go to the great state of Utah. Mr. Burgess, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for witnesses being here today. It's one thing to hear about the bigoted behavior present on today's college campuses. It's utterly appalling to hear the activist teachers that are doing the same in our classrooms, spreading the vitriol of hate to our children in classrooms throughout our nation. Unfortunately, and all too often, these carriers of hate are teachers and school administrators. And this is going down to our kids that's supposed to be teaching. Children as young as second grade are being taught to hate Jews. The question is, how did this come about? Ms. Banks, I have a quick question.
Sure.
In the press release shortly after the events of Hillcrest High School, where students stormed the building demanding a teacher's resignation and attempted to enter the teacher's room, where she said, you said, this notion that this place, these kids are radicalized and anti-Semitic is the height of irresponsibility. Do you think that these kids were not radicalized? Do you stand by that statement?
First of all, let me say this. Hillcrest High School is the school that I graduated from, so that school is very personal to
I'm
me.
sorry, I only have a few minutes.
Right.
This statement, do you still stand by this statement?
My statement at that time was that, yes, I stand by that statement. The entire school was not radicalized. Yes.
All right, so if this was a black teacher, and these were kids coming in because of her skin, because of her background, hiding out for 2 hours in a classroom, these are high school kids.
I know that.
Would you still say that this is not radicalized? Is something wrong with this?
Those kids engaged, the kids who were responsible, who led that effort, engaged clearly in an act of anti-Semitism.
Okay, so I'm really,
and I dealt with that and responded to it.
My question is, if this is a black teacher being threatened and pushed by some white bigots, would you still say that these kids are not a problem that's not being radicalized by hatred?
If it was a black teacher that was being targeted, absolutely unacceptable, and this was unacceptable.
Okay,
we
so let me ask you this: was there any?
Removing the principal of the school.
I'm sorry. Were there any consequences? I mean, I'm hearing nice words, really nice words here: teaching, redirecting, directing. What I'm missing is discipline, and I'm missing the word fired. Has anything happened to these kids that did this to this teacher? This teacher's hiding out for 2 hours.
Well, I'm not sure if you heard clearly from what I said. What I said was very clear. We suspended a number of students who were the leaders at Hillcrest High School, number one. Number two, we removed the principal of that school for a lack of leadership and oversight. I don't know how to make it much clearer.
Okay.
I condemn clearly what happened at Hillcrest was a complete act of anti-Semitism. It will not stand on my watch. We responded, and I don't know how to make it any clearer.
No, thank you so much. I'm glad to hear somebody was fired in that. Was the principal fired or just transferred to another school?
The principal was removed from the school.
Was he taken to another school or was he fired?
He's not in another school. No, he's not in front of any more children.
Okay. Ms. Martha, at most misguided administrators have resolved problems involving moving students, Jewish students and Israeli students into new classes. Result: anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism is normalized. Quick question: how does this work? So you find teachers that are bigots, and instead of firing them, you transfer them to another school where they can still remain bigots? Is that the way this works?
I'm a little confused by the question. You started with students being moved, and then you went to teachers being moved. I'll tell you that it's not something that we normalize. It's not something that we agree with, and we take action every time there's any concern or complaint.
I'm just trying to understand how this works. When you have teachers that are teaching hate to our kids and showing it, and our students are feeling fearful for this, are they fired or do they just transfer to another school? It appears that they're just moving to another place. In this case here, I guess that's the question I have. How is this being resolved?
If we have a concern or a complaint about anti-Semitism or any form of hate, we take it very seriously, we investigate, and we take action pending the outcome of that investigation.
Okay, all right, so I guess the action is not firing, it's just moving to someplace. The word of action is very subjective, obviously. Mr. Silvestri, real quickly, there's been several complaints filed by the Department of Education of Civil Rights. And again, what resulted in one administrative leave and the three others merely being transferred. I'm going to ask you the same questions. How is this working out? Or do we have a process in which you can actually get bad teachers out of the classroom, bad administrators that are teaching our kids to hate like this? Are we addressing that at all?
In all of those cases, the teachers were put on leave so that we could do a thorough investigation. Disciplinary action was taken.
I guess I'm just concerned. We want results. We want discipline. We see what's happening to our kids, and we've not taken out the cancer, which are these teachers coming in, administrators that's pushing down their hate. Every day in these classrooms is a bad day for our kids. So are we getting rid of any of these people? Or just taking action, or other actions?
Disciplinary action has been taken on all of those cases.
Okay,
and
but they're not being fired.
They understand any other further action will lead to up to determination.
Okay,
Representative
right,
Owens, thank you very much. Let's go to the great Northern Mariana Islands, where Mr. Sablan is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to our witnesses. Welcome.
Good morning.
This is a really difficult issue. It's an issue difficult for me also because it has happened in my district in the past, but in my observation, and I visit schools very frequently on almost every trip I take home, I don't see that existing in our schools, and there is a diversity of different ethnicities, different people. I'm not sure why. There may be something in there. There's got to be. There is bullying I'm aware of. I have 2 teachers in my family. There is bullying. I'm not sure about anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. There must be, but it's not obvious. So but I need to ask a question of Mr. Sykes for starters. May I, sir? As you know, institutions that are owned or acting on behalf of the government, the state, such as K-12 schools, must respect constitutional free speech of individuals, but that does not mean that such schools must allow their campuses to become institutions where hate speech is pervasive. So, given the First Amendment speech protections, how can a public school work to make its campus a welcome space to all students in the face of incidents of hate speech of any kind on campus generally?
Thank you. As the only non-educator on the panel, I'll do my best to answer, but I think the work of creating an inclusive environment where students feel free to express themselves and to learn and grow happens long before any of these particular incidents. I think it's a part of establishing a school community that is accepting and welcoming. As I said, we at the ACLU believe strongly in the importance of protecting the free speech rights of students, of teachers, and of parents, but those are not unlimited. And as I mentioned, Title VI says that the schools must act when there's a hostile educational environment. If I can just respond to the previous questions, it doesn't say that someone must be fired. I think we need to think a little bit more creatively about how we can respond to anti-Semitism and root out this idea.
I don't want anyone fired, sir.
Firing may be appropriate in certain circumstances, but I think we need to think about how we can address anti-Semitism, change hearts and minds, make children safe, without only looking to the most punitive tool in our toolbox.
Thank you. I yield my remaining time to Ms. Manning. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Mr. Sablam. First, I want to thank you all for your testimony and your condemnation of anti-Semitism and the steps you are taking. As we all know, we are facing a particularly difficult time for Jewish students and their parents. I've talked with Jewish students in my district who are experiencing anti-Semitism in North Carolina. This is traumatizing kids, it's distressing parents, it's putting pressure on teachers and principals and superintendents. And I feel strongly that this can be a powerful teaching moment. This is a time when schools should do what we expect them to do. They should teach. They should teach the facts, they should teach understanding, they should teach empathy, and they should teach critical thinking skills. Yet many teachers are struggling to figure out how to handle the different kinds of anti-Semitism that's going on, not only to teach the Holocaust, but also in discussing what's going on in the Middle East. And sadly, some teachers are simply getting on parents. So I'd like to start, and I'm going to have to pick up when my time picks up later. If each of you could describe what resources are teachers using to navigate the difficult questions about anti-Semitism or the Israel-Gaza conflict. And Mr. Banks, let's start with you.
I know we only have a short amount of time, but this is where we engage our partners. I'm joined today by Devorah Halberstam, who's here, whose son Ari was killed in one of the most heinous acts of anti-Semitism almost 30 years ago. And she created the Jewish Children's Museum to teach the history. I've sent thousands of students to this museum, and we were going to continue to send even more. I'm joined by Michael Cohen from the Simon Wiesenthal Museum of Tolerance. They're in our schools. They've gone to Hillcrest and are engaged in this process. So we're trying to avoid just casting aspersions. We are trying to lean in to how you teach. That's how you will solve for anti-Semitism.
Thank you. This time has expired. I'll be back later. Thank you so much.
Let's go to the great state of Michigan, where Representative McLean is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just have to make one comment, Mr. Sykes. Therein lies the problem. Your ability to tolerate this behavior is completely unacceptable. And sometimes you do need to use the stick because disincentives work. So with that, I was just appalled by that answer. But at any rate, Mr. Banks, I appreciate your passion. I love it. Really simple. But then I want to move to outcomes and what we can do to actually make change, because I think you said something very insightful. We need to get to the root of the problem and change the curriculum and change how we teach, right? So I'm assuming you're going to agree with me, but let me just, death to Israel, is that anti-Semitic?
Of course it is.
Of course. Kill the Jews, anti-Semitic?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Drawing swastikas or mimicking, is that anti-Semitic?
Absolutely.
I mean,
hate crime in New York, yes.
Of course. All of these activities are anti-Semitic. Vandalism of school property, right? Rioting, we agree on that, right? And we talk about taking action, right? And action is a vague term. So let's move from actions to outcomes, because sometimes when we take action, we don't get the desired outcome we appreciate or we want,
Sure.
right? So let's take a look at what actions you have taken and what has been the result of reducing the anti-Semitism in your schools.
Let me give you an example. An example of what was raised was Hillcrest High School, very passionately brought up. My alma mater that I went to, where a Jewish teacher was targeted in a frightening episode. We didn't accept that. We pushed back on that tremendously.
So can you give me an example of pushback? Because to me, pushback is that those people are dealt with swiftly, but what's your definition of pushback?
But in terms of outcomes, what I meant was we suspended students, we removed the principal of the school, we engaged the Simon Wiesenthal Center for a deeper dive in education of those kids. The teacher who was targeted made a decision, I think one of the most heroic things I've ever heard, to actually come back. She could have gone to another school. She made a decision to say, if I'm going to change this...
you fired the people. You fired
Yes, we move people, absolutely. And the outcome is that what's happening at that school now has transformed in significant ways. We're not fully arrived. This is a work in progress.
I get it. What have you done to change your curriculum?
Yeah, so we have engaged in a wide range of new resource guides, teaching about anti-Semitism, teaching about
and what are those resource guides?
Excuse me?
What are those resource guides?
We're working together with the Museum of Jewish History in New York City, who's helping us to create an educated guide for teachers.
I would offer one solution as well, because a lot of times we come up here and we just talk about problems. One solution is Morris Life does a really good job of teaching anti-Semitism and really ruling out hate around the Holocaust and whatnot. I think where everyone gets frustrated is we use these words like pushback, and I think we have to have a real clear definition of, if X happens, if you vandalize school property, if you perform anti-Semitic acts, that here is a clear policy that will be dealt with swiftly and justly. Am I hearing you say today that those policies are in place?
Those policies are in place. Here's the challenge.
Okay.
These things don't always come down to so clear yes and no. I'll give you an example. We had a school where a teacher hung up a map of the Middle East that eliminated Israel from the map. So the question is that anti-Semitic? To me, that's anti-Semitic. And we had it removed. But others have said, did you fire her? She said, essentially, I made a mistake. I didn't intend it to be anti-Semitic, and she had a reason for it.
I have just a moment. How do your administrators respond to students that ignore authority, right? I think we have three perpetrators here. We have the students, we have the teachers, and we have the administrators, right?
Right.
And I think all three of those people need to be dealt with, and need to be dealt with swiftly and justly. So with that, I apologize, I'm out of time, but I would like to see your written response to how you deal with anti-Semitism as it pertains to those three entities: students, administrators, and teachers. And with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. From the great state of California, Representative DeSaulnier is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses. Sorry, we were having a collegial conversation here. Let's start by everything everyone in this room, I believe, agrees to, and you've stated. Anti-Semitism is unacceptable. All students deserve to be free from hate and be safe to learn and thrive. We need to support all students who are being threatened on school campuses and stand against all forms of hate. Any student who feels unsafe or discriminated against deserves to have their case investigated, and the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights should take all credible claims seriously and investigate. Superintendent, I'm a neighbor. I represent a district just to the east of Berkeley. I used to own a business in Berkeley. Yeah. I love the atmosphere in Berkeley, the openness, but it does create certain frictions. Openness, I think you would agree. Is that happening right now? Is the Department of Education investigating civil rights complaints?
Yes, there is an open investigation now from the Office of Civil Rights for Berkeley Unified.
And you are cooperating with that fully, correct?
We are fully intending to cooperate. We just received a letter yesterday actually informing us officially of that complaint, and we do see it as an opportunity to reflect and grow and continue to move towards our mission and values.
And you and your board has done everything to reasonably stop a complaint from coming, and you believe that the process will show that?
We believe the process will show that.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to insert into the record letters from Berkeley parents and community members, teachers, detailing the difficulties that schools face in addressing the war in Gaza and in support of the superintendent and the board to build and maintain a safe and learning environment. There's also letters from Jewish parents about Berkeley Unified School District's support for Jewish students. I'd like to submit that for the record.
Without objection, so ordered. Without objection.
Mr. Emerson Sykes, the balance between free speech and protecting students is what we're challenged by. Justice Holmes and Justice Brandeis wrote about this extensively. Justice Holmes talked about screaming fire in a crowded room. Justice Brandeis, the first Jewish member of the Supreme Court, talked about the antidote to this, I'm paraphrasing, to challenges of irrational fear is more speech, not less speech. Could you talk to a little bit of that? He actually has a quote where he talks about violence alone should not, the threat of violence alone, and I'm quoting from him now from memory, should not stop free speech. And that in that quote he talked about men burned women as witches, and we can't condone that either. So this balance that Brandeis and Holmes struggled with all those years ago is your forte. How are we balancing that right now?
Thank you. The rules that apply according to the Constitution and statutes differ whether you're in a crowded movie theater or in a public square or in a K-12 school. And so in the context that we're talking about today, on the one hand, we have robust protections for the free speech rights of all. As the Supreme Court has also said, you do not lose your constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gates. You have the right to hold your opinions, to share your opinions, so long as they are within the bounds of the school context. But the school must act, as I've said, when there is a hostile educational environment. And so a lot of what we are dealing with today is how have schools responded in those situations? And I think, as a husband of a public school teacher and the parent of public school students, I understand that when they make mistakes, we don't send them to their room. We try to help them understand what they've done wrong. We try to help them understand the impact that they've had on others, try to figure out how to make the people who've been harmed feel whole, and try to change behaviors in the future. And so I know that good teachers and administrators across the country are doing their best to do that now. And this is the everyday work of schools, trying to nurture students, trying to help them grow, while also make them safe.
Do you believe, listening to the testimony of your fellow panelists today, that they are doing that?
I can only assume that they are doing their best.
I find it interesting that some of the members of the committee are prejudging, for instance, the case in Berkeley. At the same time, we have a court case in New York about people complaining about being prejudged in that one. I think really what I hope comes out of this conversation today and continues in the spirit of bipartisanship is that we all, again, say that hatred in any form, particularly in schools, is completely unacceptable from the United States Congress, and that we would adhere to the laws as they are, and if there's something wrong with them, we would work together to correct that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative. Let's stay in the great state of California, and Representative Kiley is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it Doctor? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble reading your last name. Ford. Yes, Ms. Ford. I don't think we got an answer to you as to whether there have been any professors terminated at your school for anti-Semitic words or conduct.
So the answer was that I'm not able to speak about personnel matters, but what I can say to you is we investigate every complaint and concern thoroughly and thoughtfully.
Sure, I'm not asking you to give us names
action.
or anything, but can you just tell us in general, has anyone been terminated?
In general, I can say to you that I can't speak about personnel matters, but I can tell you that we do follow up and we take action.
I'm pretty sure your colleague, Mr. Banks, gave us.
When any issue comes up, we investigate, and pending the outcome of that investigation, we do take action. And those actions range.
Thank you. You gave us a statement in your testimony where you said that any suggestion or assertion that anti-Semitism is pervasive in BUSD, that is at your district, is false. However, the Brandeis Center and the Anti-Defamation League have, as we've mentioned, filed a complaint. And for the sake of brevity, I'll read from their release, summarizing what's in it. It says, incidents include students repeatedly hearing anti-Semitic comments in classrooms and hallways, such as kill the Jews, non-Jewish students asking Jewish students what their number is, referring to numbers tattooed on Jews during the Holocaust, and Jewish students being derided for their physical appearance and demonized as evil. Students have also had to endure anti-Semitic teacher rants in class activities, teacher-promoted walkouts and praise Hamas, and even a second-grade teacher leading a classroom activity where children were writing "Stop bombing babies" on sticky notes to display in the building. Jewish students report being worried about mob violence, including being jumped at school. Many have said they removed their Stars of David and no longer wear Jewish camp t-shirts, and that they are learning to keep their heads down, hide their Judaism, and move through their school days in fear. Some students have left the district due to pervasive bullying. Parents have repeatedly reported anti-Semitic incidents to the administration, but BUSD has done nothing to address, much less curtail, the hostile environment. The eruption of anti-Semitism in Berkeley's elementary and high schools is like nothing I've ever seen before, said Kenneth Marcus, chairman of the Brandeis Center and former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Education. And yet you testified today, any suggestion or assertion that anti-Semitism is pervasive in BUSD is false. So my question is, if you're not willing to acknowledge the problem, why can we be confident that it's being adequately addressed?
You can be confident that I am there in my schools every day, in the schools, in the classrooms with the babies, and I'm very clear that anti-Semitism, there have been incidents of anti-Semitism in Berkeley Unified School District. And every single time that we are aware of such an instance, we take action and we follow up and we take appropriate action at that.
Okay. Can I ask you about the Israel-Palestine curriculum that's been introduced in some classes in the wake October 7th? Did you approve this curriculum?
So we do have a controversial policy that says if something is instigated or incited by our students, which was the case with this, that our teachers can respond. So yes, in response to both student interest and parent parent interest to discuss this in our classrooms, we did have a group of teachers who did try to create lessons to respond to the moment and engage our students in conversation.
So you approved it? You approved the curriculum?
Our teachers did create it, yes.
And so one of the slides in this curriculum said, for some Palestinians, from the river to the sea is a call for freedom and peace. It then cited as support a quote from Congresswoman Tlaib, who was censured by this body in a bipartisan vote. Do you think that's an appropriate thing to have on a slide for students?
What was on the slide again? Say it again, please.
It said, for some Palestinians, from the river to the sea is a call for freedom and peace. Do you think that's appropriate?
So we definitely believe that it's important to expose our students to a diversity of ideas and perspectives. And if it was presented as a perspective, you think it's appropriate? You do. So you think, I think, is it any wonder, and you said earlier you thought this was anti-Semitic, and you put this on a slide in the classroom and then students go around the halls saying it. I don't think there's anything surprising about that. But I wanted to also ask you about the ethnic studies curriculum you have, because I think you contract with a group called the Liberated Ethnic Studies Consortium, is that right? Yes.
So this consortium, as I understand it, grew out of the initial working group to form California's model ethnic studies curriculum. And the original version of that was universally condemned as anti-Semitic. 14 members of the legislature, all Democrats, said it is difficult to fathom why the state of California would want to actively promote a narrative about Jews that echoes the propaganda of the Nazi regime. Even Gavin Newsom said the curriculum was offensive in so many ways it would never see the light of day. So it was revised, but this Liberated Ethnic Studies Consortium offers the original version of it. They split off from the group and said, we're going to stick with the original anti-Semitic version, and that's the version that you went out and decided to have in your classrooms. Is that right?
That is actually incorrect, Congressman. I thank you for the opportunity to clarify.
Okay,
so Berkeley Unified School District has not purchased any curriculum from Liberated Ethnic Studies Consortium. In fact, our ethnic studies curriculum is created in-house, if you will. We pride ourselves on having.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I misheard you.
community-responsive-
I thought you said you contracted with the Liberated Ethnic Studies.
So we have Liberated Ethnic Studies as a thought partner. Our teachers and our staff and our
partner.
community members actually create our curriculum. So we're not purchasing or buying any curriculum from Liberated Ethnic Studies.
I don't understand what the difference between a thought partner and working with them on
Oh, for
curriculum
sure, I
is.
can explain to you. So Liberated Ethnic Studies is one of two experts in the field of ethnic studies that Berkeley Unified School District evaluated to partner with. Our curriculum, our units that are being created, the ethnic studies units, are created by our educators in partnership with community members, et cetera.
Thank you very much. My time has expired, but I'll just say, Mr. Chair, that you specify political leaders throughout California as anti-Semitic, and so I don't think it's any wonder then that you see anti-Semitism suddenly become rampant.
The gentleman's time is expired.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the great state of New York. Representative Bowman, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Chancellor Banks, you didn't just roll out of bed and become chancellor, and your background is not only in school safety. You are also a classroom teacher, and you're also the founder of two highly regarded high schools, the School of Law, Government, and Justice in the Bronx, and the first all-male school in the Bronx as well, the Eagle Academy for Young Men. So I want you to speak to us briefly about the curriculum that is being implemented in New York City schools to address the issue of anti-Semitism and all hate. Please be as concise as possible, because I have at least 2 more questions to ask.
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. So number one, teaching about the Holocaust, first of all, is required by New York State law. It's important to note. We also cover the Holocaust in grades 8, 10, and 11 in our social studies curriculum, as well as in a range of our ELA classes, including literature like The Diary of Anne Frank, Night, and many other literary pieces. We're also now working on a Holocaust resource guide, which is going to be available this fall in collaboration with the Museum of Jewish Heritage. But the thing that I think we're really super excited about is we are developing a very robust, comprehensive curriculum, new curriculum. It's going to be about a year before it's ready to go. That is going to cover the entire range of Jewish history. Children need to understand deeply about the history of the Jewish people if we ultimately want to solve for this issue of anti-Semitism.
So I appreciate that, because it was going to be my suggestion, because Jewish history didn't start with the Holocaust. There's an entire history of persecution that our kids need to learn about. There's also a part of history where the Jewish people and Muslims and Christians live together in harmony in the Middle East and different parts of the world, and I want to suggest you teach that as part of the curriculum as well. Mr. Sykes, can you talk about the distinction between anti-Semitic speech and speech that expresses solidarity with Palestinians or criticisms of Israel? Why is it dangerous to conflate the two?
Thank you. The ACLU has spoken out against the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, not because we have any problem with anti-Semitism awareness, obviously, but because it incorporated a definition of anti-Semitism that includes criticism of Israel. And just as it is totally legitimate to criticize the U.S. government or U.S. government officials without necessarily casting aspersions on any particular individual, the government of Israel is certainly subject to criticism just like all others. Where that goes into ethnic-based hatred or targeting of particular individuals, obviously schools and communities can and should respond. But the right to dissent against our government and against others is core to free speech.
Thank you so much. And I just have a closing comment to make. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your testimony, and thank you for your clarity around when you identify anti-Semitism, you respond swiftly and decisively, because it needs to be condemned and it needs to be handled accordingly. So I appreciate you all for being here and sharing that with us. What I'm going to ask of you, because I've been very disturbed by some of the language that has come from the other side of the aisle, language around teaching hate. Our teachers in our schools are not teaching hate, the majority of them. When I say majority, I mean 99.9%. I'm a former educator in New York City schools. I have never seen that. Teachers make mistakes, and teachers need to be educated and disciplined when necessary when they do make those mistakes. Yes or no question, just going down the line, starting with Mr. Banks.
Yes.
Can we fight against anti-Semitism and other forms of hate simultaneously? Yes or no?
Not only can we must.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes. So it's really important because there's also been reports in the rise in Islamophobia in New York City schools and across the country. Do you all agree with that, yes or no?
Yes.
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 Yes. Does sexism still exist in our society?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes.
Does anti-black racism still exist in our society?
Absolutely.
Yes.
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 We must fight hate in all its forms at the same time. I have members of Congress talking about teachers teaching hate. None of them have an education background, by the way. They're talking about teachers teaching hate. I work in Congress. When you go in the rotunda and you look at American history, you see colonists coming in and taking over America from the Native Americans. There is no reference to the black people who built this country in our rotunda. But we're scolding you about teaching hate. You know how many black statues there are in the Capitol? 3. You know how many Confederate statues there are in the Capitol? 12. I work in an institution that teaches hate, and with our policy. Yet we're scolding you as educators who have been doing the, Secretary Hall, thank you. Yet we're scolding you as educators who have been doing an exemplary job fighting against hate in our schools. So thank you for your work. Please continue to educate us.
Let's stay in the state of New York, where Mr. Representative Williams, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this critically important and timely hearing. I believe it's the moral issue of our time. When I was elected to Congress less than 2 years ago, I was alarmed that threats of violence against synagogues, Jews, and Jewish institutions were on the rise. So in March of last year, as one of my first legislative acts, right here in this very room, I introduced an amendment to House Bill number 5 requiring, and I quote, "It is the sense of Congress that all public elementary school and secondary school students should have the opportunities to learn the history of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism," end quote. All that is needed for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. And 7 months before the horrific events on October 7th, this committee had the opportunity to speak up and take steps. But every single one of my Democrat colleagues voted against that amendment. Every single one. And we submit to the voting results for the record. Nothing. Hamas announced that it was open season on Jews in Israel. Mr. Banks, kids in your school district got the idea that it was okay to have open season on Jews in New York City public schools. Instead of a reduction in anti-Semitic events in your schools in the wake of this profound immorality of a Holocaust-like massacre of Jews, we've seen an explosion of shocking anti-Semitic events. Mr. Banks, now you say that you're leaning in on combating anti-Semitism. Have the episodes of rape and murder of October 7th been presented to your students of examples of Jew hatred?
Absolutely. The heinous events on October 7th, anti-Semitic, and they have been taught now in our schools and are continuing to be taught across many of our schools.
Is the former principal at Hillcrest still drawing a salary from New York City public schools today?
Yes, he is.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
I said, yes, he is.
You are still paying
he is no longer the principal of the school.
How can Jewish students feel safe at New York City public schools when you can't even manage to terminate the principal of open season on Jews high school, or even endorse suspension of student harassments? How can Jewish students go to school knowing that he is still on your payroll, sir?
I know his payroll it is, sir. And it's not open season on Jews school. It's called Hillcrest High School. That's the name of the school. And at that school, we considered his leadership not strong enough to be the leader in that school.
Wow, but he can still strong enough to participate in your school district? He's still strong enough to be on your payroll?
As the leader of that school.
Is he still strong enough a leader to be on your payroll, sir?
Every one of the employees
Is that what you're
who
saying?
works
You're
for
endorsing
us
him to continue on your
actually
payroll
has
because
due
he
process
has
rights
the moral
within
authority
their
to lead
district
students
and within our system.
Is that what you're saying,
That's
Mr.
what
Banks?
what I said is
That's
what I
you're
just said.
saying. You're saying that he still has the moral authority.
I did not say
to
that.
be
That's
on-
what you said.
That is what I'm asking you. You're justifying
What I
his
said-
continued employment.
That's how
and
you
I'm
interpret
trying to
it.
challenge. How can that be?
Every employee who works in our schools has due process rights, sir.
Due process.
We do not have the authority
There are
to
egregious
just because I
crimes.
disagree to
There are
just terminate
egregious
someone.
crimes.
That's not the way that it works in our school system.
There are egregious crimes that have been committed under your watch. I want to give you the opportunity, we have 1 minute remaining, to speak directly to the parents of Jewish students in New York City. Think of this, as Jewish parents walk their children to school tomorrow morning, what can we say? What should they say to their children to allay their children's fears? How should they reassure their children that this anti-Semitic nightmare in your school, sir, has come to an end? Please.
I speak to Jewish parents on a
Please speak to them now.
I'm speaking
Cameras
to them
are rolling right here. Speak to them now.
I speak to Jewish teachers and parents and families
And what do you
every
say?
single
And what do you
day.
say?
And what I say to them is that we do everything we can to ensure that your child or that you, even as a teacher, are going to be safe in our schools. We don't always get it right. Part of the reason that happened at Hillcrest High School was what I considered a lack of proper supervision in that school. That's why the principal was removed from the school. So the teachers in that school are not unsafe. We removed the leader of the
My
school.
time has expired. I doubt very much that they're comforted that this nightmare is over under your leadership.
I'm sorry you feel that way.
Let's go to the great state of Connecticut, where Representative Hayes is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today to testify. I would just like to say that I agree with my colleague that those who have committed egregious crimes should not have the moral authority to lead a school or a nation. Also, as an educator, I don't know what people think it is that teachers do. I don't know what people think it is that teachers inside of a classroom or people who choose this as a profession do. I acknowledge and recognize that there's been an unprecedented rise in anti-Semitism in our K-12 schools. And we have had multiple hearings on this committee and the full in this full committee on anti-Semitism. But as an educator, I remind you that we have to teach children that all forms of hate are unacceptable. I listen to my colleague go down the list of all of the things we deal with, that teachers deal with in schools, and I can remember, the only parallel I have is I'm not in the classroom right now, but I remember after September 11th, going to my department head and saying, we need some professional development on the Muslim experience. I need to be able to support our students and make sure that other students understand their perspective. We had parents come in describing this is what this holiday means. We had students come in saying this is why I wear a hijab. Really doing a deep dive and helping students to understand the background and perspective of their peers. We're doing a disservice to students if we are not teaching them about the backgrounds and perspectives of all people. And teachers have the impossible job of bringing students together from different races, religions, ethnicities, socioeconomic backgrounds into one classroom and creating a space where all students feel safe. I really hope that on this committee that we spend some time really looking at these intersections between what is happening in our classrooms so that kids, it's a lot harder to hate someone that you know. It's a lot harder to diminish or devalue someone's experience when you know what it means or why a person practices a certain religion or whatever. According to research conducted by the ADL Center on Anti-Semitism Research, there's a direct relationship between deficiencies in Holocaust education and heightened prejudicial anti-Semitic beliefs. Ms. Silvestri, in your testimony, you mentioned that your district is taking affirmative steps to address anti-Semitism and other forms of hate by enhancing the curriculum for K-12 students to expand on topics related to the Jewish experience. Can you tell us a little bit about what your district has done to enhance the curriculum, and additionally why you believe the teaching of this education is important? And before you answer, I just want to add one thing about the comment about members of this committee not voting for, Congress doesn't set curriculum, you do. So can you let us know what you've done to make sure that students understand the Jewish experience?
Yes. Curriculum, teaching and learning is the bread and butter of what we know how to do well. We have been looking to have our social studies curriculum better reflect our student population. And we have enhanced our Jewish experience education, going younger, going into the elementary grades, training teachers so that they could implement Holocaust education in 6th grade. Training, as I mentioned in my statement, for the first time we're having hate bias training starting this summer for all staff, 25,000 employees in our school system.
Do you think it would be important for students to understand why a statement like "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free" could be harmful to some of their peers, or why displaying a map in a classroom that does not have the state of Israel could be hurtful and anti-Semitic to their friends, because that's what kids are, their friends around them?
Absolutely, Congresswoman. That is our role, is to educate them on the history so that they can understand why our Jewish students might find that phrase is anti-Semitic.
Thank you. Ms. Ford Morthiel, it wasn't your testimony, it was actually Mr. Banks' testimony where he talked about we can't suspend or expel our way out of this problem. Can you talk to us about some of the direct actions that you've taken when these things do occur? Because it has been my experience as an educator that oftentimes young people repeat what they've heard from other people at home and really don't understand the consequences or the history behind what they're saying or doing.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to respond. So I appreciate you saying that. First and foremost, we do believe our role is to educate. And so we engage our students in conversation. We want to make sure that our babies can actually evaluate and reflect on their actions and their words, to think about their intent and also to think about the impact. So conversations is a tool that we use as educators a lot. We also believe in restorative conversations so that students sit with their peers who they've hurt or caused harm to hear from them and their perspective about what happened and why it was hurtful. All of these are efforts to, again, change and redirect and correct behavior. And then, of course, education. We talk to students about history, about how and why, for example, the term that you just used might be hurtful to other students when they hear it. And again, that's what we believe is really the way to change behaviors for the long run, not a short-term solution, but one that could actually keep and stay with them as they get older.
Thank you very much. The gentlelady's time has expired. Go to the great state of New York again, where Representative Stefanik is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Banks, there's been many questions on Hillcrest, and I just want to make sure it's very clear for the record. The principal of Hillcrest High School is still employed by the Department of Education, correct?
Correct.
And what is his role?
He's serving in a role working on one of the teams under one of our deputy chancellors.
I am told that he's director of teacher development and evaluation. Is that accurate?
That I don't know his official title right here. I'd have to double check that.
That's concerning to me that you have him in a senior position. And what's very concerning about these hearings is that we're getting lip service, but a lack of enforcement, a lack of accountability. And these rules and policies matter, whether it's teachers, administrators, or students violating the rules. I want to switch to Origins High School. In October, 40 to 50 students marched through Origins High School chanting "Death to Israel" and "Kill the Jews." In addition, an independent investigation found that a teacher who teaches global history was told by a student, quote, "I wish you were killed." Another student called her, quote, "a dirty Jew," and the student said he wished Hitler could have hit more Jews, including her. What disciplinary actions have been taken against those students who chanted "Death to Israel" at Origins High School and against the student who harassed with anti-Semitic slurs that teacher?
Two things. First of all, when we've done our investigation, we have found no evidence that there was any movement through the hall saying "Death to the Jews. We looked at, and I treat that very, very seriously. That was reported in the papers. We have found no evidence that that actually happened. What we have found are a wide range, deeply troubling anti-Semitic things that have happened at Origins High School. This is the case that has troubled me the most, Congresswoman. I will tell you that.
So what are the enforcement actions?
I'm trying to tell you. We have in fact suspended a number of students at that school, but currently this case now is under litigation, and I'm being advised not to speak to the specific things that have happened there, but just know that I had visited that school after these allegations have come up. I met with parents, family, staff, students. I'm deeply troubled by what has happened there, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. I can't say more because it is now under litigation.
You understand our concern, though, as policymakers, when we have witnesses testify, whether it's Columbia University, Penn, Harvard, or New York City Chancellor, when there's a lack of enforcement and accountability, that there is a set of rules, but that individuals who violate those rules are not held accountable.
We've held a lot of people accountable. That was part. You weren't here when I gave my opening statement.
But you didn't. You said you fired the principal, and it turns out the former principal.
I never said I fired the principal.
You did. A member. You can check the testimony. Ms. McLean asked, you fired her. You said yes.
Fired the principal of who?
Hillcrest.
I never said I fired the principal, Phil. You check the record. I never said that.
I will check the record.
I will check the record.
Mr. Banks,
Never said I fired the principal.
She said, has he been fired? You said yes, and then we moved on.
I did not say that.
You did?
Well,
you said he was removed.
I would beg to differ on that.
We now know, though, that he is still employed by the Department of Education.
He's no longer at the school. He's been removed from his position as the principal of the school.
And now he is
not the same thing as terminated.
At the Department of Education. You testified to that.
Yes.
And you also said, I believe, we've been told he's Director of Teacher Development and Evaluation, and you're not sure if that's the case. Our expectation is we'll get an answer by the end of today, whether that's the case or not.
Absolutely.
My next question is, there have been multiple teacher-led anti-Israel walkouts during school time. What are the consequences for those teacher walkouts, and do those violate policy of DOE?
I'm not sure what teacher walkouts. We've had a number of walkouts of students out of school, including several of our high schools, which are also very troubling for me.
So what disciplinary action is taken in that case?
Right. The challenge that we have in that case is we do not have any rules within our code of conduct that would prevent a child from actually walking out of the school. When they walk out of the school, they are marked absent. They're essentially cutting from school. There are consequences for cutting school.
And it's your testimony today that there's no teacher involvement in those walkouts? Because independent media reports say that there is teacher involvement in those walkouts.
I don't have any evidence of that. We have evidence of one where the principal assigned a teacher to go with a student to a protest, completely inappropriate. That principal was disciplined, the teacher was disciplined in that particular case.
What was the form of the discipline?
I'm not at liberty to tell you the very specific. They were not fired, but we have a wide range of discipline that takes place in those cases, and we did take action.
And my last question is, you had a teacher at Gotham Tech High School in Queens, and you've spoken out publicly against this. He posted images of a Hamas paraglider to his social media, repeatedly refers to so-called Israel. Again, this is highlighting a Hamas paraglider who slaughtered Jews. We all have seen horrific footage, who cooked babies. These are terrorists. Horrible. What disciplinary action has taken against this teacher?
Again, action was taken. First of all, I want to just say, I think what that employee did, absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
What action?
And we took action.
What was the action?
I cannot give you the specifics on the specific employee, on this employee.
You can give us an answer. Using not to. That's unacceptable.
Time has expired. Let's go to the great Commonwealth of Virginia. Representative Scott, you were very good. Let's go to the great state of North Carolina. Representative Manning, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to set the record straight. Mr. Williams' amendment that he mentioned followed the failure of every Republican on this committee to vote for my amendment to prohibit the banning of books on the Holocaust, which I offered because schools in many states are banning books like The Diary of Anne Frank, which is an incredible tool for teaching students about the perils of discrimination. So, Mr. Banks, I was pleased to hear that your schools are still teaching The Diary of Anne Frank. And Ms. Silvestri, I'm pleased to hear your description of the training your teachers are getting to infuse your K-12 schools with teaching about what anti-Semitism is and why it is so dangerous, not just to Jews, but to our whole society. Ms. Ford Morthell, can you talk about the resources you use to train your teachers about anti-Semitism?
Yeah, so we have a number of resources that we use in Berkeley. One, first and foremost, just to unite us against hate. In November, we celebrate Unite Against Hate Month and Week, and have a number of resources that equipped our educators with facilitating conversations with our students about what hate is, what it looks like, and just the impacts of hate, and the fact that as Berkeley Unified, we stand firmly against hate. We also have a number of curriculums, our social emotional learning curriculums for our students that talk about harassment and bullying, how to be an ally, and just how to be in community. Our upper grades, particularly our 10th grade educators, do have curriculum on the Holocaust, but to the point of a previous congressman, that is not the beginning or the end of the story of Jewish peoples. And so we also integrate curriculum throughout our grade levels with texts and readings about the richness of the Jewish heritage and Jewish culture in our schools. And then generally just want to make sure that our teachers' pedagogy, their approach to teaching, is really about centering diverse ideas and needs of the students and bringing those ideas to the center so that they can engage in those critical conversations and come to truths and understanding on their own.
Thank you. Let me suggest the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum has many readily available resources to teach about the Holocaust and the history of anti-Semitism. They are formulated specifically for K-12 classrooms. They are available online. They have courses your teachers can attend during the summer. It is a wonderful resource, and I highly recommend using the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. In fact, I have introduced a bipartisan bill, the Countering Anti-Semitism Act, which includes in it opportunities and, frankly, obligations for schools across the country to work with the U.S. Holocaust Museum, teaching anti-Semitism, teaching what hate does to all of us. And I hope that all of my colleagues on this committee will co-sponsor my Countering Anti-Semitism Act. It is a bipartisan bill, and it's important that my colleagues on this committee do more than just talk before the cameras about anti-Semitism, but actually sign on to a bill like the Countering Anti-Semitism Act so that we can actually do something and build the structures to combat that. Now, an important pillar of the U.S. national strategy to combat anti-Semitism, which was issued for the first time ever by President Biden, an important issue of that is media literacy. We know that many students are exposed to harmful misinformation online every day by social media, which in many cases has inflamed tensions and led to anti-Semitic incidents. In fact, I recently viewed a video on TikTok that was probably the most horrifying thing I have heard, a young person talking about why it's appropriate to hate Jews. So I'd like to ask each of you, how are your schools teaching young people to check their sources, to be savvy, critical consumers of online content? Because that is one way that hate is being spread. And Mr. Banks, can I start with you?
Yes, please. It's a very, very complicated issue. We actually have a social media policy. Every one of our schools gets a level of training in digital literacy so that they understand how to think critically through these issues. But that is easier said than done. What we are seeing in our schools, and in fact, many of these cases of anti-Semitism are a result of young people not fully developing their ability to process what they're seeing on social media and then emotionally responding to that in a way, particularly students of Muslim and Arabic background who are seeing horrific acts happening themselves and are responding to that. So it is a difficult, ongoing process.
Ms. Silvestri, any thoughts? We only have in 13 seconds.
It is my understanding that social media literacy is taught in our health curriculum and also just as a critical thinking strategy throughout all of our classes.
Thank you. I would encourage all of you to do everything you can to figure out how we teach our students to be critical thinkers, and then maybe they will teach their parents how to be critical thinkers. Thank you so much for your testimony. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Let's go to the great state of Michigan. Representative Wahlberg, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman and thank the panel for being here. And so I had to leave. I was speaking at a quick luncheon. I didn't get the lunch from a number of higher education institutions. An important time to speak to them as well. I wasn't here for the question I believe that my colleague, Representative Stefanik, asked about the principal at Hillcrest, we had checked ourselves after hearing your response, Mr. Banks, seeing some of the room shaking their head strongly that this person wasn't, as a principal, removed and didn't go on in the New York education system. We came to find information that this person went to the New York Department of Education. Am I correct on that?
What's the question again? I'm not sure. That he's
the principal that from Hillcrest that you said was removed,
right,
and didn't go in, wasn't just transferred to another school in the system.
Right.
We wanted to check on that because I saw indications in this room that that wasn't
the
right answer. He went to the New York Department of Education, as I understand it?
Well, all of our schools come under the Department of Education. I oversee the entire Department of Education. We have schools, and then we have other administrative offices.
Well, that concerns me that this guy is still in Education New York when he had an egregious response at Hillcrest. And so I just wanted to make that clear and make sure I understood it as well.
He was removed from the school, but he is still in our
But he's still in Education New York.
Yes.
And that worries me.
I understand.
Following the attack on Israel on October 7th, our nation's institutions of higher education have been rocked by anti-Semitic protests, as we're talking about, and direct harassment of Jewish students. And while a critical eye must be placed on the teachings and policies at these institutions, we can't overlook our K-12 system. And so thanks for holding this hearing today. In fact, we know that the teachers that had been trained in our higher education institutions to being change agents in the world are in our K-12 systems, and they have been for years been trained to be anti-Semitic themselves. Critical theories that they've been trained in, oppressor and oppression, and important as well, anti-American. So it's a challenge that we have to look in our K-12 system. It's during this developmental phase that students start to grasp the difference between right and wrong and critically begin to realize that other people have their own feelings that might not match theirs. If we fail students at this scholastic phase, then it's no wonder we're seeing the level of intolerance and violent rhetoric later in their studies and even in our K-12 system. I recently met with educators who have used the Morse Life Holocaust learning experience to help educate their students about the realities of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism history, and I encourage our institutions to look into that training. I'd like to pose for our educators in the room just this one question and answer as briefly as possible. What have you done specifically to teach critical thinking in classrooms and promote reason and the underpinnings of moral and civil behaviors that mitigate hate? And I guess I'll start, because I have a W for name, I'll start at the end of the table first. Ms. Ford-Morthell.
Thank you, Congressman. So this is something that we integrate in our instruction starting from the youngest of grades. First of all, we engage our students in open-ended questions and prompts that allow them to bring their ideas to the table, and then we share information with them as well, but we are not a direct teach type of organization, and so that is one way that we facilitate and actually build our students' muscle to be critical thinkers and critically engaged. We have norms in our classroom. For example, we talk to our students about being present, being respectful, being brave, being open and being aware to different perspectives, being flexible and being sensitive. So it's a muscle that they build throughout their grades in Berkeley Unified School District. And of course, we teach them to be critical consumers and evaluate and analyze the information that's coming to them through a number of perspectives so that ultimately, again, they can make decisions on their own.
We'll hope we'll see the impact of that in an exemplary way. So, Ms. Silvestre.
Yeah, similarly, I'm not a teacher or principal or superintendent myself. As a school board member, it's my understanding that we follow the Maryland State curriculum, the Maryland State standards. We have a comprehensive curriculum that integrates critical thinking throughout, offering multiple perspectives so that students can see history and facts through different perspectives. That's my understanding, sir.
Mr. Banks.
First of all, critical thinking starts with learning how to read, and we have leaned into a very significant way with our NYC Reads and making sure all kids are on grade level. Beyond that, we have a wide range of things from Socratic method to project-based learning, all of that. And finally, I would also like to say, sir, that I would be careful to cast aspersions on an entire system. We have some teachers who have had some of these challenges, But we've had members of Congress who've made anti-Semitic statements, and I certainly would not cast aspersions on this entire institution. Similarly, I would stand in defense of New York City educators as well. We have some, and when we see they rears its head, we deal with it.
Well, I would stand with you on that, but I also think that
the gentleman's time has expired.
As well.
The gentleman's time has expired, and now we go to the great Commonwealth of Virginia. Representative Scott, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, earlier in the hearing, a gentleman from New York raised questions about the this side of the aisle in terms of our commitment to fight anti-Semitism. I just remind him, after, well, it was pointed out, the context of his, because we voted against his amendment, the context of that amendment was pointed out, but also after the UVA alt-right rally, we asked for hearings on anti-Semitism and couldn't get it, and we've also been unable to get any hearings on other forms of hate. And I'd ask Chancellor Banks, do you deal with other forms of hate other than anti-Semitism, like homophobia, racism? Do transgender students have a right to be safe in school? Can you talk about other forms of hate?
Yeah, and hate rears its head every single day. And as a black man who's had to deal with, my people with a history of racism in America as well, this is something that is ever present. But as the chancellor of the New York City Public Schools, the work that we see, the aspersions that are cast against the LGBTQ community, the aspersions that are cast against Asian Americans, homosexuals, there's no end to this scourge of hate. And so that's why I say anti-Semitism doesn't simply affect Jews. Anti-Semitism, and so I stand up not only anti-Semitism, I stand up against Islamophobia and all other forms of hate. You can't put them in silos. That's not the way that we can be responsible about how we are going to approach this. We have to deal with all forms of hate. The whole world lives in New York City, and I have a responsibility to be the champion and the chancellor for everybody.
Well, thank you. And just as an aside, is it your practice to determine facts and sanctions based on media reports or due process?
Is that for me?
That's for you.
We are responsible. Just because something was written on the front page of a tabloid doesn't make it true. And so we have to investigate. We do that responsibly, and then we move appropriately to deal with those situations on a case-by-case basis.
And you indicated that you can't discipline yourself out of the problem. What did you mean? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, solving for anti-Semitism. And I believe this deeply. It's not about having gotcha moments. It's about teaching. You have to raise the consciousness of young people. And the challenge we have as a system is that we do have some adults who bring their own bias into the classroom. And we've got to figure out how do we unpack all of it at the same time. But the ultimate answer for anti-Semitism is to teach, to expose young people to the Jewish community so that they understand our common humanity. And I would certainly ask that my colleagues from across the nation, and I would call on Congress, quite frankly, to put the call out to action, to bring us together, to talk about how we solve for this. This convening for too many people across America in education feels like the ultimate gotcha moment. It doesn't sound like people who are actually trying to solve for something that I believe we should be doing everything we can to solve for.
Thank you. Mr. Sykes, we haven't heard anything about the context of any of these events, the seriousness of the problem, whether there's anti-Semitism or a comment on the position on the war in Gaza. Can you say another word about why it's so hard to determine whether or not expressions are protected under the First Amendment or a violation of the criminal code or a violation of Title VI or campus policy?
Yes, Congressman, these are all situations that are evaluated based on the totality of the circumstances. There are words that we might agree here that we all agree are offensive. But we also can understand that certain words depend on how they're used, when they're used, to whom they're used, how often they are used. And all of those are relevant to determining whether speech is protected or creating a hostile educational environment. And if I might, I meant just to add on to the question about how do we promote critical thinking and exposure to a variety of ideas. One of the things that we are doing at the ACLU is fighting back against bans on inclusive education. This was started by an executive order by the former president and has now been copied and pasted in multiple states. 18 million Americans now live under an education gag order where certain ideas are being prohibited from classrooms. So this is the epitome of trying to crack down on critical thinking. And so we think that this legitimate threat to free speech and free inquiry needs to be addressed urgently as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Representative Scott. Let's go to North Carolina, where the chair of Education and Workforce Committee is Dr. Virginia Fox, is recognized for 5 minutes. Dr. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. I'm going to ask Ms. Silvestri to pull her mic a little closer to her mouth so I was having trouble hearing you before. President Silvestri, you said in your opening statement, quote, "Our policy is to initiate an investigation each time the school system receives a complaint or we witness particular anti-Semitic, hate-filled, or racist language or actions. On average, how long does each anti-Semitism investigation take?"
I don't have an exact number of weeks that it takes, but I believe that we do a very thorough job, so we take as long as is needed to investigate.
Okay. Are the victims always notified of the results?
The victims are notified that an action has been taken, but not specifics of what the consequence was doled out.
Will you pledge to notify people when you have done the investigation?
We are working on improving our communication so that the victims have more information about what the outcome has been.
Okay, working on it. Okay. Ms. Superintendent Ford Murthel, you said in your submitted testimony that you were, quote, excited, end quote, about California's new ethnic studies law. However, we've heard from Jewish families who are concerned that Berkeley's curriculum presents a slanted perspective of the Israeli-Palestine conflict. For example, the curriculum teaches that the war's consequences for Palestine are, quote, no water, no food, no electricity, end quote. Whereas the consequences for Israel are, quote, ceremonies put on hold, travel advisories in place, and cities shut down. Do you think that's a fair representation of the Israeli-Palestine conflict?
I do not think that's a fair representation.
Have you consulted with Jewish groups in considering how you will teach ethnic studies?
So, Councilwoman, Congresswoman, I want to distinguish the lessons that I believe you're speaking about in our ethnic studies curriculum. The lessons that you're speaking about was a lesson set that was created in response to a lot of curiosity, a lot of questions, and quite frankly, a lot of confusion from many of our students wanting to know what was going on. And so we had a group of history teachers and social studies teachers and ethnic studies teachers create a lesson set in response to that. That is distinguished from Berkeley's ethnic studies curriculum.
Thank you. Mr. Banks, we've talked about the map that was posted in a school, the Arab Cultural Arts program at the school, where the map has been funded by the Qatar Foundation, a nonprofit owned by the country's ruling family. The Free Press has found that QFI donated over $1 million to the New York Department of Education from 2019 to 2022 for materials such as this map. You know the map I'm talking about, where Israel does not exist.
Yes.
Okay. Does your office vet the materials purchased by these funds for anti-Semitism? If not, will you commit to establishing vigorous vetting to ensure that foreign entities unfriendly to Israel are not stocking your classrooms with anti-Semitic content?
Yes, and we do vet the materials. That map was not a result of the Qatar Foundation. That individual teacher bought that map on her own with her own resources when she was in Jerusalem. That is what she told us. So it was not part of the resources that came from the Qatar Foundation. But we do vet all the other materials and resources that come into our schools, and that foundation has had no impact. They write the check. They've had no impact on the curriculum that's been developed and how it's been implemented.
So individual teachers are allowed to bring in materials that may be very anti-Semitic. Are you going to vet those materials?
Absolutely. And as we hear about those cases, in New York City, we have 77,000 teachers. And so, this is not Mayberry, it's New York City. It is a very large system, and it's difficult for me as the chancellor to say, any individual map that's up on a wall in any particular classroom, I'm already aware of it. But we make sure that the principals of those schools, they're supposed to provide that level of supervision.
I have one more quick question for you, Mr. Banks. Do other countries donate significant sums to New York City public schools?
I do not have, I would have to get back to you on that. I do not have any evidence in front of me now that we have any other foreign governments which are supporting other programs in our schools. But I don't want to misrepresent here. We can certainly get you the answer for that by the end of the day.
Well, we'd be happy if you would follow up with an answer on that.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Yes.
We are nearing the of our committee. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your thank you for being great audience members. And we just have to have closing statements, and I'll yield to Ranking Member Bonamici for her closing thoughts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today and for your work. I do want to note, Mr. Chairman, that the witnesses today are from what might be considered blue states. And I do want to introduce into the record articles that discuss instances of anti-Semitism in Florida, Texas, and Alabama. So that's in the record as well.
Without objection.
And Mr. Chairman, as I said, I was hoping there could be a constructive conversation during which we would work together on finding the most effective way to address and prevent anti-Semitism in schools. Sadly, tasks like this are made more difficult because we are in an era of deep division. A time when too often dialogue about tough issues is confrontational, if it happens at all, and a time when, it pains me to say this, but it's relevant, the top Republican running for president of the United States has engaged not only in anti-Semitic tropes, but also in divisive, degrading, and disparaging language, including mocking a reporter with a disability, calling American troops cowards if they were captured, ignoring the rule of law, threatening to have people shot by police for a shoplifting or a minor crime, bragging about groping stars, and making so many countless and demeaning comments about women that it's impossible to count them. I could go on, but my point is, sadly, there has been a tone set at the top that seems to tolerate disrespect for others, a tone that hurts not just us as a legislative body, but as a nation. So I'll say it again, it is my hope that this committee will set aside differences and work on, in good faith, on how we can best address and prevent anti-Semitism in our schools, in our country, as well as other hate speech. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to continuing the conversation, and I yield back.
Ranking Member Bonamici, thank you so much. I would say it's been an excellent meeting. I would say when I met each of you, just for that brief moment before we start, I regret, Mr. Sykes, you were running in and we're all just racing in Congress. Said we were, our mission was to have an open and honest conversation. I think we delivered that. And if we're going to solve the problems that we've identified today, it starts with recognizing that it's happening and that we need to do more. I think we're reminded of the most precious asset that's under each of your purview, and that's the next generation, these young kids. Some have described them as with minds full of mush that you help form into shapes and critical thinking. And we know that any seeds of hatred or anti-Semitism that's planted there without weeding it and without shaping it can grow. And we can look at the video screens of what it can become if not left unchecked. Mr. Sykes, I'm very aware of your presence here today with the ACLU is a reminder that we are a country built on free speech. But free speech doesn't include death to Jews or some of the other vile slogans that we've heard. I'm aware of that, but it's so hard to be a kid of the 70s, and it's hard to imagine growing out with social media and the other pressures of being a kid today. We shouldn't have to worry. They shouldn't have to worry about getting beat up or whatever just for their religion. And so we're better than this. So Mr. Banks, when we met in the hallway, you said, we've got work to do. And indeed we do. And hopefully it's not only a wake-up call for your school districts, but to everybody that's watching across America. It's 2024. 2024. There's no place for this at all in America. America's the last great hope where we can all hopefully get along, and we're not proving it very well. So I think the lesson, too, is no matter how small, and Ms. Ford Morthell, you said something, too, no matter how small the incident, it needs to be investigated, and people need to be held to standards. There needs to be consequences for crossing that line. We're holding all of you because you hold our most precious asset, our kids. And so with that, to the kids and the parents and the teachers that I met with earlier, and that many of us did, we stand with you, and we will not cease shining the light and holding everybody accountable, because as a nation, frankly, we are better than this, and we all have a role to play. So our work begins today going forward. To the witnesses, thank you for coming forward, for your frank discussion, and for your commitment going forward that we all can live in a safe society without hatred and the fear of violence against us. And without objection, there being no further business, the subcommittee stands, and this hearing is now adjourned.